Hi everyone, I'm Jaya Vishwanathan, and you've found the No Brainer podcast where I discuss all things neuroscience in delightful conversations with various experts. I hope you enjoy today's episode.
So speaking of gender, I kind of have two follow-up questions, and feel free to tackle them in any order that you'd like. But so I guess one question is a little bit more time or recent related for me. So one of them is regarding COVID, because I
Yeah.
know that at least in my circle, based on whether people were in a relationship, in a happy relationship, in a miserable relationship, whether they were single, whether they were gender fluid, whether they were cisgender. So everybody's experience of the isolation was maybe slightly different, but also it was tied together in this human condition of just we are social animals and we're having to not do the things that we normally do, like look at someone's face when we're talking in person or something like that. And so that's one kind of question. If you have anything to share, if you don't, that's okay too. But the second question I have is more about us, again, speaking of gender and gender fluidity. Can you maybe help dispel some myths or tell us some real differences between, because we know that estrogen and progesterone and testosterone are powerful steroid hormones, that and there is a chromosome difference like XX, XY, XXY. All of these things result in a different phenotype. And so, but then in our society today, there's so much attributed to behavior that's gender based, right? The same behavior in a man can be seen as assertive, but in a woman can be seen as aggressive, for example. And then, there are these preconceived myths that men are better at direction and driving and women are better at social connections. And I see you're smirking as I say it, but these are real myths that have been propagated. And so, again, if there's any biological basis to them, can you shed some light on them and maybe help clarify the actual results or consequences of gender differences, if you will, from a biology and neuroscience perspective?
Yeah. Okay, so I will begin with COVID because it's going to be quite, I would say, quite fast. Is that it's very, of course, it was a very difficult period for many people, and it's actually it lasted for a long time, and it did leave some trauma for some person. As you say, we are social animals, and for some people who are isolated, it has been very difficult. So just to explain a bit how it works in terms of trauma and biology, we know that this type of big events like war, like epidemia, like I don't know, terrorism or this type of things, they actually increase personality traits. So, for example, if you're an introvert, you're going to be even more introverted. If you are anxious, you'll be even more anxious. If you're it's exactly what you were talking about predispositions. So we know that this type of strong thing, they are going to push the cursor a bit further than something a bit more mitigated. So that is a very rough way to explain it, but it does explain a lot of what we have seen.
Right.
So what we had, at least in France, with my colleagues and I, and what we seem to have seen a bit with other people, and a bit in the literature as well, is that actually we had everything that is possible into the spectrum. So people loved it. I'm not going to teach anyone anything. Some people loved it, some people hated it.
Yeah.
The problem is that everything is normal. This diversity is normal because, as a biologist, we don't see life as a medical doctor who have like a value of glycemia that should be between this and that. We do know that there's a Gaussian, like a normal distribution. So for us, this distribution is absolutely, by the name, it's a normal distribution. So this is actually it made it a bit more extreme. The extreme were more represented. This actually makes me a very good introduction for the second question, which is the gender differences. If you know where I'm going to go with this, it's exactly that. I mean, there are many layers of explaining gender, and now we talk in sexology, we talk about sex gender as a whole, because we do know, as you were saying, that there's so much intrication between biology and environment and culture. So we do talk about sex and gender. So first, it's important to explain what is what and what is not. So sex will be defined as a biological system that you can have a lot of definitions from. Gender is something that is from society and culture. So with gender, it's very important to explain and underline and I don't know, it's very important that people do realize that gender is not challenged in science. Science recognizes that gender exists. It's not a fake news, whatever. It's something that is very, no, but it's important. It's something that it does exist. And it has been described first by Margaret Mead, which was an anthropologist from Barnard College, so the Columbia for Women, 100 years ago. So she went to the islands in the Pacific, and she came back writing an essay for her PhD that is what was called Coming of Age in Samoa. And I think it was 1928. So it's been 100 years, literally, that we are using the gender. And it is a fact. It is a scientific fact. It's not coming from biology or medicine, but it's coming from another science that is very important in cognitive science, which is anthropology. So this is real. And so gender, what is it? Is actually the difference based on sex, based on dimorphism of men and women. And it's the definition of what we say, what is a man and what is a woman. What we were talking about, how a woman should behave, how a man should behave, what a woman can do, what a woman cannot do. So this is extremely cultural, and it is what we do most of the time. We are not at the biological level most of the time, because we are a social animal. We function at gender level. So we educate people at gender level. We have representation in the Bibles. We have stories. We are, we are species all over the globe, all over ages. We are telling each other stories. We have archetypes. We have a lot at so many levels. Gender is absolutely everywhere. It crosses countries, languages, social classes, everything. So gender is a real thing. And it's very stable. We can measure it, we can change it, and it's fluid and everything. So that's important to really stress this out. Sex, actually, it's a bit more complex, and actually many people do not understand the real definition. So there's been a lot of attempts to define sex. Will it be the hormones, the being able to reproduce? And we know that, for example, we have women who cannot have children. We have women who go to menopause. We have men who are sterile. Are they not men? Is a woman not a woman anymore when she is 65? Of course not. So there's been a lot of questioning, and actually in science, in biology, the only thing that can define sex is, do you know what it is? Have you ever heard of this?
No, I thought it was chromosome, but I might be completely wrong there.
It's the gamete, the sexual cell. If you have two different types of sexual cells. So we are a species who have an ovocyte and a spermatozoid. But actually, coming from biology, we have a depth perception that is very different. And if you take bacteria, well, it gets a bit more complex. If you take types of mushroom, it's even more complex. So you have a species of mushroom that, so actually, if you unzoom and look at the wilderness of biology and of
Yeah.
diversity that exists, we can only reproduce with half of the population. Well,
Right.
actually, that is a bit of inefficient in a way. So if you
Fascinating.
can
Okay.
actually have three sexes that you have in some type of mushrooms or bacteria, actually you can reproduce not with half, but with 60%.
With
It's
2/3.
a bit
Yeah,
more
yeah, yeah.
interesting. And so like that, you have a species of mushroom that is up to 10 puissance, 10, not times, sorry, I forgot my mathematics in English. 10 with 26 zeros.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah,
I don't
so
know
I forgot.
number
But
either.
okay,
10 with
so that's
26 zeros. Okay.
that's
That's an
the number of.
exorbitant amount. Yeah.
It's an exorbitant amount of different types of germinal cells. You
Yeah.
can reproduce with everyone. You meet
Yeah.
anyone in the street, you can potentially an offspring
A
with them.
baby with them. Yeah, 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 yeah. That's
Yeah,
amazing.
that is
So,
the best and the most Darwinian species that we have for reproduction.
yeah.
That is the best. So
Yeah.
that is how we biologists really define sex, and the sex difference
Yeah.
is only based on the germinal cell. Do we have one or two types or three types of 1,000 types
And
of
type.
germinal
Yeah, yeah.
cell? So that's very
So,
different from what you can hear in many YouTube channels or masculinist things. So you understand
yeah.
how far it is and how we have to be careful as listeners. If we are not educated of biology, how
Yeah.
far from the truth we hear informations.
Yeah.
So actually, in human beings, what we have, so we are vertebrates, we are mammals, we are a bit dimorphic. So dimorphic means that we are different with male and female. So we have two
Yeah.
sex, biological, and we are relatively different, but not as much
Yeah.
as some birds, for example. So for a very long time, many scientists thought it was for some birds of paradise, because the female and the male are so different, they were categorized
Yeah.
as two different species.
It's too
And now
different.
we do
Yeah,
know
yeah,
that,
yeah, yeah.
yeah, and this is very common in birds because they are very dimorphic. They can be very dimorphic. So primates are not that much dimorphic. So the
Yeah.
question that we have to ask is absolutely not that, is what society do we want? So it's a philosophical and ethical question. What society do
Yeah.
we want? Because actually, if we decide to separate people against their some physiological difference, actually it has a name. It's called eugenics. It's eugenism if you
It is
decide to
eugenics.
dismiss
Yeah.
person. So you cannot say whatever and use biology in any ways because it actually leads to disasters. So
Yeah. Yeah.
I hope that answers
So,
your question. It's
no,
a
that
bit
was
long, but
fabulous. And I was going to say to our listener, dear listener, if you're just tuning in, I hope you can see why Dr. Malet-Karas is one of my absolute favorite people to talk about philosophical things with. And if you haven't yet, I encourage you to go back and listen to our full conversation, especially the part about 10 followed by 26 zero possibilities for having offspring. So I think this is fabulous and gives people a great idea of what biology of sex really comes down to. So thank you very much for clarifying that, Aurora. So as we're reaching the end of this recording, one thing I didn't want to miss out on asking you is what advice would you give to people of any age who might be interested in themselves getting into careers such as yours?
so I would say, I mean, not career just as mine. It's just any career. I would say do something that you really love, and actually, that is
Okay.
actually the core of the advice I will give to anyone is just, you really love something, just go it and go through it and pursue and work a lot, learn a lot. Never give up on learning, because you never know what you don't know, and there's so much to learn. So of course I will strongly advertise biology, because it's a wonderful science, but sexology is also very interesting, and it requires a lot of knowledge about anything, from the law, from medical science, from philosophy, from gender studies and everything. If it's regarding more to academia or research per se, I would say something that I would have liked to hear a bit more when I was a student is just, you need to be very careful with who you choose to work with, like your PhD supervisor
100.
or your boss. And we discussed about that a lot, but this is actually very, very important. And you can, you can have a career that is made or unmade by, if you don't have a boss that is good enough. So I think that would be a very important piece of advice that I think young scientists, undergrads need to really understand. Sometimes it's a bit smarter to not do the PhD of your dream, to work on your dream topic, but actually have a supervisor that is extremely good and will help you, will support you, than to work on a fascinating project and have a crappy supervisor.
Yeah, that's great advice. I will also, if I may, actually add, just having known you and what a unique career you have had, I think one of the things that sets you apart and successful in your careers is also approaching, especially because you deal with a lot of patients, is approaching a lot of these topics without judgment or preconceptions. And also approaching it with empathy, for like having the ability to put yourself a little bit in the shoes of other people and realize that we don't have any insight into someone else's life experience until that moment, right? Until we choose to put ourselves in their shoes for a little bit and try to imagine what their experience might be. And I've seen you do that, so I just want to put in a plug that I think that's what sets you apart as both a clinician and a scientist who works with people as opposed to on a bench, or at a bench, doing like molecular biology studies or something. Not that that doesn't require empathy, don't get me wrong. But anyway, I do think you're a stellar clinician because of it. So one of the last questions I had for you is, what are some of your future projects that you're working on that we can look forward to? Tell us about your book, which I've had the privilege of knowing is in the pipeline. So tell us a little bit about that and how someone might want to find it.
So now there's my first book that is coming out in a few weeks on September 4th. So it will be in French. So for now, it's only the French edition. So this book will actually be my future for the next month, because I will have to promote it and such. It will, so I don't know if I told you, but I got a news recently that it will also be an audiobook. So you can hear it as well.
Wonderful.
Yeah, I'm very happy about that.
I still want my signed copy, but that's me. I want a signed copy.
It's already, but of course you will have. It's already on the site for you. And so the book actually that I made is actually about brain, sex, and love. So it's an update of where we are, and it's like gathering every type of information, because as you said at the beginning, we have information about sex and love everywhere, on Instagram, Twitter, on the TV. We have Netflix series and everything. We don't understand anything anymore. Even I, sometimes I end up being completely lost on my own work. So I needed to gather everything, because there's so much. And I also wanted to make a book that is extremely accessible to everyone, and also people who are not scientists at all, so that they can understand what is science, what is not science. When the YouTube channel, when the article they are reading is actually good science or not, because I explain not only the result but also how scientists work, what is an experiment, what is placing it back into evolution theory, what is a control group, and many things like this, to actually people who are, because most of us, we are human, we are very curious, and I know that so many people who wants to understand. And because I work with human beings in my office, but also I work in France with the media, with the radio, with many journalists, I also realize how uneducated we usually are about science and biology. So I wanted to give them in a very easy insight of how what is the neuroscience and cognitive science of this topic that we are all very concerned with in our everyday basis.
Yeah. So what is something that motivated you to write it in the first place? Some of the things?
Honest, there is this, as I said, to help people better understand and have answers, because it was very difficult for me. So I have many examples that I can say. So, for example, as I said before, in France, we have a lot of psychoanalytic theories in our culture. And even now in France, we still don't know much about attachment theory of Bowlby. You know how attachment is made when a child is with the person who take care of the child, and we know from him how this period can be critical into the relationship when the baby will be an adult, and how he or she will react to relationships. And this is something that is very important, and much more important than any Oedipal complex or Freudian theories. And so that was one of the things that motivated me. Many other things, like misunderstanding about oxytocin and dopamine. So there is no hormone for love. There is no neurotransmitter of happiness. And this is quite exhausting to see. And we talked about it, and I know you understand.
I commiserate. Yes. Yeah.
Exactly. And this is very sad, because actually we propagate an idea that the brain and biology speaks the same language than us, which is this is not true. Biology does not speak the same language. There's not a kind of a copy paste of our words, our concept into a molecule. We cannot have a molecule for freedom, or a molecule for whatever, or a specific gene for one specific behavior. And this is important, I think, to explain to people who are not scientists, because for us it's obvious, but I realize that actually for many others it is not.
Yeah. No, that's beautiful. Thank you. That's such a beautiful thought. Any last thoughts?
Well, no, I would say thank you. And I see that there's your amazing book that is behind, that is a very, very good book as well. And if people who are listening haven't seen Jaya's book, go and get her book, that is wonderfully done, and it's very good for children, and it's very I mean, it's very beautiful, honestly, and it's very smart, and it's a very good way to represent both the diversity of biology and the complexity of neuroscience. And you did an awesome job at making it simple and accessible to children. So that will be my last thought. That will be to.
Oh, thank you so much, Aurore. I really appreciate that, and I know we share that mindset in maybe combating a little bit this mistrust of science, but also kind of sharing with the world that, science is not a series of facts. It's actually knowledge building upon each other over time.
Yes.
And so I can't wait. My French is very rusty at this point, but I will use your book as an excuse to get back into it and hopefully come out not having too many questions about the vocabulary, but I'm sure I'll learn a ton
you won't.
when it
I'm sure you won't
when it
have
comes
any problem
out.
with the French.
Oh,
I'm sure
wow.
you will be. It will be easy for you.
Well, thank you so much, Aurore, for taking time out of your busy schedule and sharing with us a little bit about what it means to be a sexologist and a neuroscientist and how you tackle your clinical and research questions from both angles, which makes, I'm sure, your patients very grateful to have that dual or even triple expertise in hopefully having them lead a better life from that point on. And also, thank you for your work for tackling something like eating disorders and sexual dysfunction. You know, in my, I don't know how many, 13, 14 years of neuroscience, I have never heard of a research study such as that one. So I think you're paving the way to something that desperately needs to be done. And so thank you for that, and thank you for joining me. And yeah, I look forward to your project and for things to come, and we'll stay in touch.
We'll
Thanks.
stay in touch. Thank you
Bye.
for having me. Bye.
Merci.
Hey everyone, hope you enjoyed this episode of the No Brainer podcast and see you at the next one.
Discover the magical world of senses with Baby Senses, a sensory neuroscience primer for all ages. Journey through the wonder of sensory systems, from traditional human senses to extraordinary animal abilities, in this wonderful award-winning children's book by Dr. Jaya Vishwanathan. It brings to life a world hidden from the naked eye by blending neuroart with neuroscience to reveal nature's complexities and marvels. Baby Senses is an enchanting exploration of how we perceive our world. With a helpful glossary at the end, this book is perfect for young minds and curious adults. Dive into this beautifully illustrated masterpiece and awaken your senses to the beauty and diversity of life.